Let's talk about trimmers. Hi everyone, it's the Four Gun Guy. And you know, SHOT Show just occurred about 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of products that came out of it. And one of them that caught my eye was the new, I think it's the RCBS, partnering with Henderson on a case trimmer and chamfer, deburr, all that stuff, everything in one machine. And I've had a couple of those, but I wanted to talk to you about some things to think about when you're getting ready to drop $800, $750, $800 on something that can do everything. So if you're ready to go, let's get to it. After I saw the video from SHOT Show on the trimmer, I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask the people that I shoot with. What do they do? So I asked this question. I said, how often do you trim your brass, not including chamfer or deburring, which could be a separate process? So how often do you trim your brass, your case? Here were the options that I had there. I'll put this up here. Every firing, needed or not, I run it through the trimmer. That was, 6%? Every firing, because my trimmer also chamfers and deburrs. Excuse me, that was 70%. When within X amount of SAMI specs, that was 7% or 1%. Only when length exceeds my specs. So maybe you have a custom chamber like I do, and you're going to look at those specs, 17%. And then Mike added never, and Greg added when the coal exceeds my chosen length, and that had 0%. So probably a couple responses. I think there were 108 responses overall. I let this thing run for a day or two. So let's talk about some things. From a trimmer perspective, as I said, I've gone through a number of them. I started with this one, which is the Ellie Wilson micrometer case trimmer, manual. I never did hook a drill up to it or anything like that. I just manually did it. And this worked okay, but it was tedious for one thing. And number two, I found that the micrometer there kept drifting a little bit. So I'd always end up getting longer and longer wooden trim. So then I went to another type of trimmer that was an all-in-one. It was the Gerard, I think. And I did a review on that. It was a good trimmer. But here's what I started to find. And this was more for my 6.5 Creedmoor brass than my BRA brass. I started to find that not all the brass needed to be trimmed. It all needs to be chamfered and deburred, but it doesn't necessarily need to be trimmed. So there's a big difference there, right? You can trim and chamfer and deburr with one of these all-in-one units. But if your brass is short and it doesn't need to trim it, then you may not chamfer and or deburr it because it's not reaching. Usually in these things, what they've done is they've made it to where they've got either two cutting edges here that when your brass goes in there, that's rotating and it's trimming and chamfering and deburring your brass. Well, if your brass is so short, it won't even engage these cutters. So what I found myself ending up doing was I'd put it in there, I'd feel it, and I'd go, I'm not sure that did it. I'd take it out, no, it didn't do it. So I'd set it aside. Then I'd have to run it through my Frankfurt Arsenal, right? Prep center. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of spending more time figuring out, did this actually work? Did it not actually work? And then I also found that in some instances, the blades on there, and believe me, I took my time. In fact, I called the gentleman talked to him. He helped me calibrate and set it up, but then half the time it would only get like half of the chamfer and deburr on there. And it was just like, it was just too much of a hassle. So I ended up getting rid of that. Now, let's talk about what I'm using now and what is now out there and how much you can spend on this stuff. So right now I'm using the Lyman Case Trim Express to trim the cases. And I love this thing. It's easy to use. It works great. And then when I'm done, it's part of my reloading process that I just did a video on about, a month ago. And again, if you want those documents, I'm happy to send them to you. But I just trim everything that needs it. And then I run it through my Frankfurt Case Prep Center. I chamfer, deburr, clean the inside of the neck with a nylon brush that's rotating on there. And then I lightly clean the primer pocket. So I do all of this in 2 steps. I guess part of my thought is, if you don't mess with the primer pocket, then yeah, okay. You don't have that step, you're never gonna do it. If you do lightly clean your primer pocket, I promise you, it takes you an extra 3 seconds to chamfer, deburr, and run it through the inside of that neck. Maybe 5 seconds per case. And I do case prep because I do enjoy it. It's relaxing to me. It's not something that I want to get through this. So I enjoy doing it. But now let's talk about some of the things that are out there on the market. So if you're going to look at something like the Hornady high-speed 3-in-1 power case trimmer, this thing is $629, I think. That's a lot of money to spend on this. If you're going to look at, like I said, the Henderson, that thing is upwards of $779. And I think the RCBS is around that price range or maybe a little higher or lower. But you're looking at $800 by the time your taxes and shipping and all that stuff for a device that I can probably get away with for $250. Again, I'm just trying to save you money if you don't need something this serious. If you do want something this serious, I think that's great. But just remember, you're not going to get every case done. Now let's talk about the cases and how often do we really need to trim. Well, again, I have a custom chamber job that my gunsmith Larry gave me the specs on, so I bought my own reamer, and that's what he uses. And as far as my chamber is concerned, the length of the case is 1.57 inches, okay? This is a freshly fired piece of brass. I haven't done anything to this thing. And this is at 1.562 inches. So that is, what, 8 thousandths? 8 thousandths short. I can promise you that in 18 firings of my Alpha 6mm BRA brass, you know how many times I've trimmed this? 0. This brass just doesn't grow. So I haven't had to trim this brass. My 6.5 Creedmoor brass, I might trim that every 6 to 7 firings, maybe. So I think a lot of this also has to do with the cases you're running, the chamber you're running. A lot of that comes into play. The dies you're using, how you're resizing your brass. Does it have a lot of play in it after you've resized it and when you shoot it? And so does that mean that you're going to have to trim that brass more? So I just wanted to kind of bring this up and say that, look, when you see these fancy new pieces of equipment, this thing's $800, as I said, calm down, think about it, think about what you want to do in the process. And do you want to always be wondering, did this thing actually do what it was supposed to do? Because what you don't want to do is get into a situation to where you're blindly saying, well, this is only trimming and chamfering and deburring half my brass, so I'm going to run those cutter heads back or run them forward. So I'm trimming more off the case just so lazy me doesn't have to do a second or a third step after, quote, trimming the brass. So I would just say, think about all that. If you want to do these and they're going to work out for you, I think it's great. If you have the money to spend it. But if you want to just have an easy to use process that you always know, I am trimming the brass, then I'm going to do the final prep of the brass by chamfering, deburring, cleaning the inside of that neck, and cleaning that primer pocket. So anyway, I just want to do a quick one on that. I don't know how quick it is, but I wanted to do one on that. Again, I'm here to try to save you some money and save you money on some things that you may not necessarily need right now in your process. Maybe down the road you will. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. I appreciate it. Likes, comments, subs. Please ask someone to subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, shoot straight.